VocalEye Almost Live Zoom, Szepty, Whispers, hosted by Amy Amantea, with special guest Veronique West.
Welcome to this VocalEye Almost Live event. My name is Amy Amantea. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Associate Director for VocalEye. I'm your host for these Almost Live events, and I'm a member of the blind community. And as I do every week, this week is no exception. It's really important to thank those of you who have made donations and supported the organization, through our entire time of offering these almost live presentations. It's made a huge difference in how we budget for this, how we share with funders, what your experience is in this space. So thank you for your testimonials. Thank you for your donations. There's always a donation link that's posted in the chat if you feel like you have capacity to do that. But also please keep in those testimonial letters coming because they really, really mean a lot to us. So thanks to all for folks who have shared those. If you happen to be watching this particular event on our YouTube channel, we would love for you to just hover over to those like and subscribe buttons and go ahead and click on them. So please, we invite you to do that. VocalEye is broadcasting to you from the traditional and stolen lands of the Coast Salish peoples, in particular the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to share this evening, I was remembering about being offered an opportunity to work with some Indigenous community members on accessibility. And one of the things that was mentioned was that there isn't a word for disability in Indigenous languages. And so I thought, I think I maybe need to do a little bit of research on this. So what I have found is that there is indeed not a word for disability in most Indigenous languages, that there are some words that have been used for sort of specific conditions that might happen, but that are outside of sort of the blanket of disability. But there really is no such word for disability. And this has both benefits and barriers to it. So one of the barriers is that it means that some members of the community may not be aware of supports that are available in their area that might help. For example, VocalEye, right? So if you don't identify with disability because it's not part of your cultural language, then you might not know to look for, services that are available to people with disabilities. The benefit, though, of not having a specific word that means disability in the community is that community members are not segregated out. Folks are taken care of with the same compassion and the same care as every community member. So historically, when someone was born with a disability, and we're going back sort of in Indigenous histories here, it was looked upon that maybe somebody who was pregnant maybe ate something or did an activity during pregnancy that resulted in a baby being born that was different from the rest of the community, but that baby was celebrated and praised and cared for as every community member was cared for. There was no segregation. And in some Indigenous languages, they have attempted to adapt an existing word that has a relationship to the word disability, but then there are many people within these communities that are refusing that, feeling that that may label them and stigmatize them and make it not about the fact that they were born differently, but a fact that they may have, and this is the language that they use, quotes, limitations. So they don't want a word to be attached to how they were born, and they don't want that word to become a stigma around perceived social standing. So there are some sort of like barriers and pros to not having the word disability in your cultural language. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And in the capacity of the conversation that I was having about accessibility, was that it made a big difference in how we shared what accessibility implementations were in place for community members to come in. So we kind of had to develop a whole new language around that, which was a super interesting process. So I thought I'd share that with you all. Welcome to this Wednesday, April the 19th, 2023. And tonight we are proud to offer you our almost live event number 117. Szepty Whispers, with our special guest tonight, Veronique West. So I know Veronique is standing by, and we're going to spotlight Veronique in a moment. I'm seeing a square. Awesome. Here's Veronique. Welcome, Veronique.
Hello.
Hello. How are you this evening?
I am a little bit tired, a little bit nervous, but also really grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm really happy to share space with you. We've known each other for a while, and I consider you a friend. So thank you for offering your work to the community in your space. Can you
Yeah,
tell us a bit about who you are as an artist?
sure. Yeah, so I go by Veronique or V. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns. I'm a non-binary artist, arts worker, and disability advocate. I'm a settler of Polish descent, and I'm based on stolen Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories. Um, yeah, so I would say my work definitely is informed by my lived experience with neurodivergence, madness, and chronic illness. Um, a lot of my projects as an artist explore how disability reshapes our understandings of self, kin, and community. Um, yeah, and a lot of it is very collaborative and works across various mediums. So, like performance, sound art, web-based art. I've also done one virtual reality project, which was pretty cool with some other artists. Yeah, and then also I work as an advocate, mostly in contributing to disability-led sort of like consultation, education, and community organizing stuff, as well as some peer support stuff.
It's all really important work. So thank you for doing it because there's not a lot of us working in this space doing this work. This project, Szepty Whispers, where did that come from?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think so. Like on a personal level, in my family, for many generations, people didn't really talk about what I would refer to as mental health disability or madness, or there's lots of different ways to sort of label that experience.
Mm-hmm.
But it was generally just like kind of an unspoken thing. Um, and I think there are a lot of really complex reasons for that. And that's also something that I think is true for a lot of people that for various reasons, these experiences aren't openly talked about. Um, and so I think the project emerged from a curiosity of mine around like me and on my mother's side our different sort of cultural frameworks for understanding mental health disability and whether there was a way we could somehow connect across these silences and connect across our different cultural understandings of mental health disability. Um, and I think, talking to lots of other like peers and people I know, this idea of sort of like generational gaps and sort of generational silences around disability is like a pretty common thing. And so part of the interest in the piece is like, how do we, I guess, navigate those gaps? How do we, on some levels, accept that maybe we won't ever share a common language for these experiences, or there's certain things we might never be able to actually talk openly about, but also keep trying to, I don't know, I guess, build connections or like find ways to be in relationship with each other in spite of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of that really resonates as I'm hearing you say it. Um, when when you identified yourself as neurodivergent, Veronique, um, can you share with that may be a new term for some people here? Can you share what that means, maybe to you specifically, or maybe what it means sort of as an umbrella term?
Yeah. So neurodivergent is a term that I think originated, as far as I understand, from folks who identify as autistic, but has come to reflect a lot of different identities, basically identities of folks um, whose minds and brains work in ways that have been considered like outside the norm over time in like sort of psychiatry, um, Western psychiatry, like how it has sort of defined like normative brains and stuff like that. And so now the term is often used, it can be used by autistic folks, folks with ADHD, as well as like a variety of different experiences, like including some folks with mental health disabilities also see themselves as falling under the neurodivergent umbrella, for instance, or Tourette's. There's like a lot of different experiences. I think the main thing about about the term neurodivergent is that it was coined in an attempt to reframe these experiences as different ways of being and not necessarily like negative ways of being or like broken ways of broken ways of being. And so yeah, it's really like a term from the community, like a term that comes with a sense of I guess like reclamation of those experiences. I think that's something that's really important to understanding it. Yeah.
I come across a lot of people that are using the term very proudly because there hasn't been a way for them to express that part of themselves for a very long time. If we think about accessibility for community members, because I know that's part of your advocacy work and just a part of who you are as a human, what kind of accessibility did you try to bring into this particular project?
Yeah, well, something that Amy is familiar with, because Amy worked on the project as one of our amazing artist consultants, is that our team was really interested in this idea of creative accessibility. So like experimenting with how accessibility can be done in ways that are sort of connected to the artistic choices of a piece and not like just sort of functionally there, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so like the piece itself is quite fragmented. It's like a very fragmented multimedia performance where there's like fragments of personal narrative and fragments of sort of like found material, so like interview transcripts, lists, sort of research, those kinds of things. And then there's also like projection design and staging. So there's like a lot of different media elements that are sort of juxtaposed with each other in a very fragmented way. And I think one of the things that some of the accessibility practices that we included, so there was definitely like a sort of trauma-informed access approach in terms of not including any kind of like direct or explicit like references to violence or traumatic events, even though those events are kind of like hinted at or sort of suggested in more of like an abstracted way. So that was one form of accessibility. And also embedding audio description creatively into the piece. And what was neat about the sort of fragmented aesthetic that we chose is that it allows for lots of different things to be put together. So I think that allowed for elements like audio description or also like captions to be included without it feeling kind of like incongruous with the rest of the piece, because already it's like so many different elements being kind of like layered. And also there is some sections of the piece you'll see that kind of feel almost like prose more so than like say dialogue in a play. And so that also kind of lent itself to the audio description in terms of being a bit more like descriptive and literary.
Okay, yeah, just a little bit like our community was talking about audiobooks before we even started, that it in some ways is kind of written with that kind of feel from a prose perspective. So it already lends itself to some integrated description and some creative access. Well, I'm really excited to experience this, Veronique, and you're going to join us again after the piece for a little Q&A with the community. So this is going to run roughly around an hour, friends, give or take a little bit. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy Szepty Whispers by Veronique West.
You're listening to the pre-show audio notes for the performance Szepty Whispers. These notes aim to increase access for blind and partially sighted audiences, but everyone is welcome to use them. They last approximately 7 minutes and include descriptions of the performance style, the performer, the set, and the staging. Szepty Whispers runs from December 1st to 4th at Progress Lab 1422, which is located at 1422 William Street. On every evening from December 1st to 3rd, there's a 7:30 p.m. performance. On December 4th, there's a 4 p.m. performance. The show is approximately 75 minutes long. Szepty Whispers is an experimental multimedia theater piece with one performer. I'm the performer as well as the writer. The show unfolds through my live narration and movement, along with projection design and audio recordings of various voices. The show's structure mirrors my ways of thinking, feeling, and being as a neurodivergent person. The scenes are short, poetic fragments that don't move chronologically from past to present, but often switch back and forth. They follow a mysterious, intuitive structure that isn't initially clear, even to me as the performer. I gradually uncover the structure as the show progresses. My name is Veronique. I'm a non-binary settler of Polish descent. I have white skin, blue eyes, and brownish blonde hair in a mullet-like cut. I'm a neurodivergent person who isn't professionally trained as an actor. I move and speak a little awkwardly and tentatively. I often stay in the shadows or stand behind parts of the set because of my discomfort with being fully perceived by the audience. The set doesn't represent a literal space, but illustrates my inner emotions and thought processes. Videos and images are projected onto various surfaces, illustrating my fragmented feelings, memories, and ideas. Captions are also included in the projection design, since Szepty Whispers takes a creative approach to accessibility. As I arrange and rearrange set pieces, I conceal and reveal myself to the audience, illustrating moments of guardedness and vulnerability. The set pieces include 2 large mobile wooden frames, which face the audience and have a wooden table between them. The frame that's furthest from the audience has a solid white drape hanging from it. The frame that's closest to the audience has a lace curtain. The fabrics hanging from both frames are used as projection surfaces for captions, projection design, and a live feed video. The live feed video comes from a camera on a steel pole, which films the top of the table. The walls at the back of the room and another white screen on the left are also used as projection surfaces. The lace has a loosely woven pattern that evokes a past era. It can become more transparent or opaque depending on the lighting, meaning that it can either conceal, blur, or completely reveal what's behind it. The lace is used in several ways throughout the performance. Near the beginning, it's a curtain. I close it and hide myself behind it. Later, I open the curtain. Later still, when I speak of my grandfather, I remove it from the frame and use it as a tablecloth. I crouch down under the table and it becomes a refuge. When Polish punk rock music starts playing, I throw the lace onto a chair, move the table around, and take the front frame off the stage, leaving me exposed. Near the end, I sit wrapped in the embrace of the lace. In general, when I describe myself performing an action in the present tense, I also perform that action on stage. Because Szepty Whispers has a creative approach to accessibility, audio description is embedded into my lines as the performer. Throughout the play, I collect photos, texts, interview transcripts, and other archival documents that have been scattered on the floor. As I examine a photo, I describe it. When I find a text, I read it out loud. You hear the interview transcripts as audio recordings. The show uses sound cues to suggest my fractured ways of thinking, feeling, and being. Sometimes I speak through a microphone, narrating the live, present moment. Sometimes my speech is pre-recorded, narrating a memory. Sometimes my recorded voice sounds like this. Ration cards, protests, tap phone lines, which signals that I'm quoting my mother. There are 3 other pre-recorded voices in the play. The majority of them are excerpts from interviews I did with my mother. She speaks with a slight Polish accent.
Yeah, it was this secrecy and keeping to.
Other pre-recorded voices are from Rachel Yehuda, an American trauma and neuroscience researcher.
People say when something cataclysmic happens to them, I'm not the same person. I've been changed.
And Maria Buko, a Polish scholar researching transgenerational memory.
These people don't fully understand what's behind their own personal stories.
The sound of static crackling, like this, is used to underscore shifts between fragmented thoughts or ideas. Whenever the phone rings, it's my mother calling me on my cell phone. It sounds like this. Whenever I collect an archival document from the floor, you hear this. Thank you for taking the time to listen to these pre-show audio notes. I hope you enjoy the experience. My phone buzzes. Your name flashes on the screen, Mom, and I freeze. How are you? You'll ask, and I'll shut down, jump straight to some script I've rehearsed. 'Cause I mean, how do I even begin to answer that? But also, I want us to talk, actually talk about this thing we both know and somehow never manage to say. So I do nothing. Just stare at the phone as it rings and rings. And I can't speak. I'm just stuck. And suddenly I'm somewhere else. A dark space split by two frames, like windows. From one hangs sheer lace, from the other white canvas. A long table stretches between them. Across the frame split, moving images. Right now, the image of a shoreline ripples, faintly outlined, like an etching. As I glide between the suspended lace and canvas, I become a shadow, obscured and enveloped. Then I find a piece of paper, a ritual from Mom's childhood, Tapienia Marjane. In the winter, people gather scrap materials. As spring approaches, they build an effigy, which they take to a body of water. They burn the effigy, scatter the ashes, and leave the water's edge. They return to their homes, then repeat the ritual next year. No one knows exactly what it means. I notice more pages, photos, diary entries, interview transcripts, scattered everywhere like clues, maybe? Traces of the answer I'm looking for? Step 1, in the winter, people gather scrap materials. So I start picking up the pages. There's always a before and after. Not before and after the migration, at least, not exactly. Something else shapes these two worlds that my mother moves between. I can't follow her, but sometimes when the door is ajar, I can peer through. From a young age, I'm pulled towards the places where reality shows its cracks, its seams. At every opening, I strain my ears, listening for snatches of the other side. Sometimes this sense of not being fully here is an electric charge, an incantation, a miraculous melting away of selfhood. Sometimes it's a riptide, which hooks my limbs and sends me spinning into the dark. I can't follow my mother, so I go somewhere else. Still, when I lift the escape hatch, or slip between the trees. Part of me searches for the sweep of her shadow, the flicker of her footfalls, the whisper of her breath. Where do I? How do I? Okay, so you know when you're somewhere public, like on a bus, and almost everyone's giving one person this look. It's like without saying anything, they're all saying, that person is crazy. And not the socially acceptable, we all go through stuff kind of crazy. The other kind. I remember the first time somebody gave me that look. I mean, I understand. It's a reflex, camouflage, code for, don't worry, I'm not like that. I'm like you. But then, well, I felt it. I was on the other side, and a word, an idea blew open, blew apart. And no, that's not right. A black and white photo of mom as a teenager in Poland, with her back turned, holding a book and walking towards a Soviet-era apartment building. As a teenager, I often lie awake at night, parsing through my swirling thoughts. Suddenly, a sound breaks the silence. I strain my ears, listening. From the other room comes a sharp breath, then a choked cry, then another. I clamber to my feet. Mom? She doesn't respond. Mom? She still doesn't respond. Squinting, I edge towards her shadowy outline. I hold my breath and reach out. She flinches, jolting awake. What? What is it? You were, making sounds again, in your sleep. I don't say screaming. For some reason, I can't. Oh. Sorry, Maluki. I nod and shuffle back to bed. I feel a flicker of something, a kind of unease or urgency to dismiss what I've seen, but it quickly fades. Maybe it was an article or an online forum or that visit with the doctor in the walk-in clinic, or the time my partner asked, really asked, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Maybe it was a knowing silence or a series of blurted mutual disclosures or a shared laugh or the feeling after my friend attempted. Maybe it was a support group or an affinity space or an activist training. You know when something just clicks, falls into place, and no, That's still not right. A list of superstitions. Don't spill salt. Don't greet guests over a threshold. Don't gift anyone knives, needles, or scissors. Don't gift anyone shoes. Don't use a candle to light your cigarette. Don't swim in lakes, rivers, or seas before St. John's Eve. Don't keep a corpse in your home over the weekend. Don't stand by a window during a thunderstorm. My mother's life started when she got here. That's how she frames it. I don't doubt her, but I sense moments of slippage, redaction. Those split seconds in a film when the audio jolts and the image flickers. Over time, the flickers beckon. I find myself returning again and again to the question of what happened. We're sitting at a cafe. I realize that this is my chance. I need to ask her. My pulse hammers and my palms are slick. I stir my coffee, smooth my clothes, and adjust the position of my notebook on the table. I endlessly formulate and reformulate phrases. I don't think she's ever said, "I don't want to talk about it," or "Don't ask me." Still, I seem to be inching towards some brink or precipice. I feel a surge of vertigo. I take a breath and clear my throat. Then, The phone rings again and fuck. I can't. I'm not. So I sink down, make myself small. I think I tried, Mom, to bring it up. Or maybe not tried. I thought about it. Had the impulse. I remember once during my undergrad when I was losing it with no tools, just spinning out. You were driving me to my dorm, and maybe I was too quiet, or maybe you could just see. I mean, it's pretty obvious that I was. You pulled up in the driveway and asked if I was all right. And I remember thinking to myself, she knows. You could say something. And I just brushed it aside. I made some excuse and left. A definition. Wspominać. A verb which can be translated as to recreate some aspects of the past by thinking about them. She says that no one in our family had close ties with their ancestors. There were generations of estrangements. When I ask why, she seems to waver, searching for words. She muses about a war, a conscription, invasions. Then she adds,
So yeah, it was this secrecy and keeping to a lot of keeping a lot of stuff secret. There were suicidals in the family, more than one. So that was another in the Catholic religion. That's a big thing. So nobody would ever talk about that. Depression or mental illness, that was another thing. Nobody spoke about that because that was also in Polish culture not accepted thing. So a lot of this was just kept secret. and we don't talk about it. So, yeah.
And I think now is the time. I need to say something. But I don't. The space between us stretches until nothing can fill it. And the moment passes. Okay, I understand. Labels are the worst. I wish we didn't need them. Especially in English, where it feels like you can trace everything back to some kind of violence. You know, even a few psychiatrists are now saying that the book they've been using to put us in boxes isn't really based in science. They're saying that mental illness doesn't exist, not in an objective sense anyway. It's just biased opinions about what's normal and what's not. They say this, and then they keep using that book to lock people up. Like, these biased opinions have fucking consequences. And plus, activists have been saying this shit since forever, and nobody... Sorry, I tend to get a little... I'm making this about me. My anger. My bullshit. A black and white photo of a snowy city street. A military officer stands in front of a tank as ordinary people trudge by, expressionless. I reach up, my fingers tracing the edge of the sheer lace, and begin to unhook it, section by section. My motions finding a steady rhythm. As I unhook the lace, it transforms, unfurling into a tablecloth. I slip beneath the semi-transparent refuge. He's dead. She never talks about him, and I never ask. It's simple. Then, when I'm 13, we go to Gdańsk, her home city in Poland. At some point, she says, "We're going to see my father. He's not dead, he was hiding. He was very politically involved." I'm not sure how I feel, if I feel anything. Maybe I'm confused. Why was he hiding? After all, the regime fell. Maybe I'm indifferent. I never expected to know him. After that, things become murky. We go there to that apartment. We climb the stairs, knock. He opens the door. Then what happens? I invent what I can't recall until myth blurs with memory. I just know without a doubt that there's a weight in the room. Something won't or can't be said. Stark sunbeams cut through the dark around us. As I pass a window, I glimpse bright shreds of concrete, grass, sky. I'm afraid that you'll worry, I guess. Or maybe worry's not the right word. I think you want me to have a good life, an easier one than yours. When you ask me, how are you? Are you happy? I always wonder, what if there's another question? I mean, what makes a life good? If I feel the full spectrum, if I feel and think and act in ways that aren't easy, but true, what does that make me? An excerpt from an interview with Mom.
But I remember my mother stressing to me especially that I have to be at home by 6 o'clock every day. And I remember she said to me, if you do not come home by 6 o'clock, if you are outside after 6, the soldiers or police will shoot you, or they can shoot you. They don't have to have excuse. They don't have to ask you, because this is a martial law. So I know my mother was worried because I like to wonder.
As I ask her questions, she jokes, shrugs, alludes to ration cards, protests, tapped phone lines, an underground concert, a censored film, checkpoints, arrests, a disappearance. Words for war come easy. The material truth, the chain of events. I know more or less what happened, but I don't know how it changed her, or how she made sense of that change. Her snapshots are brief and devoid of context. She's detached, ironic, even casual, a bystander, or a sly narrator, mocking her protagonist's choices. An excerpt from an interview with researcher Rachel Yehuda.
People say when something cataclysmic happens to them, I'm not the same person. I've been changed. I am not the same person that I was. And we have to start asking ourselves, well, what do they mean by that? Of course, they're the same person. They have the same DNA, don't they? Right. They do. And what I think it means is that the environmental influence has been so overwhelming that it has forced a major constitutional change, an enduring transformation.
As I spread out the pages on the table, I find a pair of scissors. I hook my fingers through and start cutting. Step 2, build an effigy. Gradually, a character surfaces. She both is and isn't my mother. I use guesswork to give her sparse details substance. I conjure her and unhook, however briefly, from myself. She walks on rooftops, skips mass, throws punches, and stargazes in the dead of winter. She navigates seismic upheaval. She never cries. She can't stand cowards, doublespeak, Russian language classes, and lightning. Her home isn't a safe place. She defies her father, the church, the state. She gets plastered with her friends, argues, philosophizes, and dances in the street. She often disappears into books and daydreams. She holds her cards close. As strange as it sounds, I keep thinking, free. She seems free. Her blurred limbs, her flashing eyes, her smile. Something always flickers under the Christmas pageants, the socialist summer camps, the first communion photo ops. A secret. Shreds of paper have fallen away, and a shape has emerged. A person's outline. It's hard to explain, but I think once you go there, to that place you've always been afraid of, when you really face it, I mean, it's so fucking scary. But also there's freedom. I remember thinking the first time I told someone, fuck, I can finally let go of the bullshit, the act. I think that's why words matter, at least for me. A poet I know, Banna B, says that words are spells. I think when you speak some words, the right ones, you can take back your reality. Or, I don't know. A list of sayings. Listen more and speak less. Too many words will hurt you. Better discretion than courage. The truth does not caress. Every so often, she stops short, changes the subject, trails off, or stares into space. These disruptions loom larger than her more direct forms of communication. You'll never really know me, she says at one point. There is a version of me that you'll never know, because you don't speak the language. You didn't grow up there. And part of me thinks, of course, that makes complete sense. But another part of me thinks, that can't be true. There must be a way. I think that's when I make the decision. When I realize that I have to go to Poland. I have to see what I'll find. Step 3. Take the effigy to a body of water. As I slip behind the suspended white canvas, I look down and notice more paper figures, human-like shapes. I pick them up and realize they're connected, strung along a thin wire. I hang the wire behind the canvas, and the figures form a line of shadows, a unified front. When I step into the museum, I am aware of every choice, calculation, act of curation. Everything is somehow both heightened and flattened, like I'm walking through the set of a film from my childhood. A film that I always half believed was real. A living room, letters, an interrogation cell, silverware, newspapers, a grocery store, jackboots, toilet paper, lace, an armored truck. Display cases sort and separate. Crisp printed labels itemize. Rooms and hallways delineate between topics, decades, regimes, and resistance movements. I'm suddenly aware of my gaze, the slow probing slide. Maybe it's the photos, how they frame their subjects. Maybe it's the way I've learned to look. I slip out of my head and into my senses. There's a shift, a feeling like sinking. It happens again, at other times, in other places. I track the triggers. A statue of a child with a rifle. The woods behind my mother's high school. A former asylum. A spray-painted slogan. The feathery, rippling fields. There are no words for these moments, only signals. Signals that bypass the brain, flooding the nervous system. I keep thinking, after everything that you, all of you, went through, how could you have no words, no way of, how could you not make space for it?
Because that was also in the Polish culture, not accepted thing.
We're not so different. We can't be. Pamiątka, a noun which can be translated as a token of remembrance left after a person, a group of people, or a place. The token has no material worth, only emotional significance, and usually has been safeguarded through wars, cataclysms, wars, uprisings, or other cataclysms. In Warsaw, there's something called the Institute of National Remembrance. According to its website, the Institute aims to preserve the memory of Poland's past. In particular, its struggles against its occupants, Nazis and communists, its citizens' actions in defense of freedom and human dignity, the crimes against peace and humanity that took place in Poland, the enormity of the harms, losses, and damages suffered by its people. The Institute strives to ensure that these aspects of the past are never forgotten. An excerpt from Mom's teenage diary. I wake up in fear, not knowing what the next day will bring. I am nervous all the time. My heart hurts. I am writing this to express my feelings. I imagine I am talking to someone. In reality, I am the only one talking and the only one listening. I am complaining about my situation, my illness, my life. And I am reassuring myself that things are not that dark, and that they can be much worse. When is this going to end? When? As we pass plaques, memorials, monuments, I think about my mother, who she'd be if none of this happened, who I'd be, what she'd tell me, what I'd know. I think about what's been taken, the sheer, incalculable magnitude. and my vision blurs, and my bile rises, and I'm shaking. I'm watching a video. It cycles through various close-ups of grim, young faces. The faces seem luminous. There's a black and white filter, which brings to mind old world reels. Reels carried through sewers by fiery-eyed resistors. As these young people speak, spare piano builds to a swelling string crescendo. Their direct gaze unsettles, confronts, implicates. My attention darts between the English subtitles and the spoken Polish. We are a generation betrayed, deprived of leaders that we can trust. We are a nation with a gagged mouth. They blur the pages of our history. They want us to forget. We are free people. We are active. We are uncompromising. We are a generation of change. And for a moment, I see myself there, amongst them, fiery-eyed, unflinching, ready to take back what's mine. In Warsaw, I meet Maria Buko, a scholar who's researching transgenerational memory. I ask her about her most recent project. She's interviewing the children of political violence survivors.
So it's important where the transferred memory comes from, actually, because it's not that obvious. Because you can create your family memory not only from the talks with your grandparents or parents, but you can just, and that's the most important part, at least from my research, you can also recreate it from your expectations towards not only your parents, not only like history in general, but also like you can recreate it from your expectations towards yourself, whom you want to be.
I watch another video uploaded by the same user. This one's shaky, unfiltered. It captures a rally in Wrocław. A young person stands at a podium wearing a military-style jacket. A silver cross dangles at their throat. Behind them, a green banner ripples, emblazoned with an arm, wielding a sword. Their face is still. They speak with a subdued, slow-burning intensity. They warn of an approaching army, intent on invasion. After a few moments, I realize that by army, they mean refugees fleeing the conflict in Syria. They invoke the crowd's sacred duty to defend the fatherland. They lament the fall of Christian Poland and white Europe. I stop the video and shut my laptop. How did I get here?
So I'm also researching this, how the personal traumas, personal memory are sometimes misused or even abused by different political circles and actors. They just want to have these second generation victims as, I don't know, like PR.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, actors, but these people don't fully understand what's behind their own personal stories that are real. Their grievance is real, their struggle is real, but the context that it's put into, sometimes, let's say, not the prettiest.
You'll never know. I didn't. Nation. My illness. What is this going to end? When? Nation. Machine. Damages. Number of victims. Losses. The crimes against peace and humanity that took place. My heart hurts. I find a box of matches. Step 4. Burn the effigy. I strike a match and set the paper figure alight. Losses. Nation. What is this going to? Illness. My heart hurts.
But I can tell that if you were to go to the for instance the Institute of National Remembrance in Poland, and you would tell them that you want to research and to create a play about your mom's experience during the communist times and how the memory of communism could have traumatized subsequent generations. Mm-hmm. They would be, I guess, super excited, but they would expect you to create a certain piece, right?
I close my eyes, lie back. Feel myself sink, spine to the floor. I picture you, alone, scared as hell, scared like me. And then the audio jolts, the image flickers, and you're here, or I'm there. You wrote the words and time blurred. You were always talking to someone. We see each other. Take a moment. Take a breath. Our lips move. And there's nothing but static. Then I find Excerpts from the essay, If You Cannot Whisper, The Performative Language of Magical Spells, by Denise J. Shafran. The basis of much Slavic folk wisdom is a belief in the inherent power of words. Some utterances are taboo, others are sacred. There are specific conditions for casting a spell in Slavic magic practice. All enchantments must occur in silence and hiding. Thus, the proclivity for whispering. True enchanters normally whispered spells and referred to them as scent on the wind. My mother tells me about a ritual from her childhood. In the winter, people gather scrap materials. As spring approaches, they build an effigy, which they take to a body of water. They burn the effigy, scatter the ashes, and leave the water's edge. They return to their homes, then repeat the ritual next year. No one knows exactly what it means. Scholars believe that it's connected to Marshanna, an old Slavic deity. During the winter, she inhabits our world. During the spring, she descends to the underworld. According to Christian missionaries, the ritual banishes Marshanna, who's a destructive winter deity. But pre-Christian sources suggest that she's more than that. In depictions, Marshanna holds a key, which unlocks the doors between realms and seasons. She crosses thresholds, embodying change, in-betweenness, the ever-present push-pull of here and there, before and after. An excerpt from an interview with researcher Rachel Yehuda.
Yes, but it doesn't all have to be negative. I mean, I think the purpose of epigenetic changes, I think, is simply to increase the repertoire of possible responses. I don't think it's meant to damage or not damage people. It expands the range of biologic responses. So I think that we have to be very careful about how we talk about generational effects. A lot of people want to say generational scars, but they're merely effects.
Step 5. Scatter the ashes. I don't really know how eye contact works or what I'm supposed to do with my hands when I speak. But sit with me after a suicide attempt, and I won't try to fix you. And yeah, crowded rooms make me want to run for cover. But weep, rail, leave your body for a while. Slip through a crack in consensus-based reality. And I won't ask you to make yourself legible. And yeah, sometimes there's pain. So much I think all I can do is open my skin or find a fire to walk through. Anything sharp enough to soften the edge. But when I finally text you, it's because you remind me that pain can be a portal, a prism. We pass through it and refract, light splitting to reveal a spectrum. Step 6, leave the water's edge.
Hello, Malunki. How are you?
Wonderful. All right, friends, we're back. We're going to welcome Veronique back into the space. And there's Veronique. Veronique, I would love to ask you a few questions if you are game for a little conversation with me. I'm wondering, I mean, we could hear the applause after this performance. I'm wondering what kind of feedback you may have been getting from audience members.
Yeah, I think, the feedback that was the most meaningful for me was I had a few people send me emails like after having seen the performance, talking about the way that it brought up for them a lot about their own relationship with family members and like some of the conversations they had with family members, trying to sort of bridge generational differences. Also, kind of how it had made them reconsider the way that things maybe their family members had been through in their home countries, like wars or uprisings or things like that, had affected their relationships with their families. So I think just hearing about the way that it made people reflect on, just like their own relationships to the questions the piece was asking about, intergenerational dialogue and mental health and those kinds of things. I think those were the most meaningful responses. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing that. Because I imagine there's a certain amount of vulnerability, perhaps, that goes into creating a piece that is so close to the artist, so close to the family of the artist. Can you talk a bit about your process in how you approached this work?
Sure, yeah. Something that was important to me throughout was that I did send every draft that I wrote to my mom, so that she could have like self-determination over how the content, both like the interview content that was like directly her speaking and also the content about her life was used. And like there were some things we talked about and she was like, I don't want this ever mentioned in the play. And so I didn't mention it in the play. And I respected that. But it wasn't actually, it didn't feel limiting. Like I think part of the way the piece operates is that there's a lot of things that are unspoken and not talked about and just kind of hinted at. And so the fact that there were certain things that are omitted or like not directly explained didn't feel too artistically limiting, I would say. But yeah, the piece really, I mean, it's interesting. The whole process really started with me just asking my mom questions about her past because she didn't talk about it at all when I was growing up. And so I really only started learning about what really happened because of this project. Like before that, we never really sat down and had a conversation about what her life was like in Poland. And so, the piece really started with me just asking her questions and doing those audio interviews. And that ended up like forming the foundation of what the piece was. But originally it was just very like open-ended, just like questions, because I was like, I really have no idea what your life was like at all. Like we've never talked about it. Occasionally there have been like things that came up where I was like, oh, clearly this is like alluding to something or hinting at something, but we never actually just sat down and were like, had a conversation. So yeah.
Was that something that just the conversation with you and your mom, was that something that felt good to have or felt scary or precarious to have? I'm curious because in some of us in this space are doing a project called My Mother's Story, where we're writing our mother's stories. And for me, I have to sit down with my mother and ask questions. And sometimes I feel like I'm afraid to ask things, or she might be afraid. Not afraid's not the right word, but you have to be a really comfortable place of vulnerability to really share.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think like maybe this is just part of my neurodivergence, but like having the pretext of an artistic project made and like where I could script out what I was asking and I could explain it away for like another purpose made it a little bit easier. Like because it was very nerve wracking, but having that sort of structure for it and that like almost excuse for it instead of just being like these are the emotional reasons why I need to know about the past you never talked about was actually like a lot easier in some ways. And so it's interesting, like I think initially it was very much like I was like, I'm doing this project, so I want to know these things. And it was kind of a little bit formal that way. And then after when I was actually like sifting through the content, I started writing drafts and sending it to my mom. The having this sort of character of myself talk about things became a weird pretext for us to then have the more personal conversations where my mom would be like, oh, like you never told me that this is how you felt about this thing. Like now I know because I read it in your script, like or stuff like that. So weirdly, like the artistic pretext became this sort of a way for us to start having the more vulnerable conversations we probably wouldn't otherwise have had because it would have been too hard to have just on its own, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It totally makes sense. I'm gonna have to adopt, I think, a bit of that approach and how I'm addressing the work with my mother and what I'm doing, but for another day. Friends in the community, this is your time if you would like to ask Veronique questions or share comments about what you experienced tonight. Veronique is here to listen to those and witness those and share themselves in the space. So I'll ask you to use the raise your hand function and I will call on you if you do that. If not, Veronique will and I will continue chatting away for your listening pleasure. And we already have a hand just as I stop. It's Carrie. Carrie, I'm gonna go ahead and unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, Carrie, we can hear you.
Hi, I just I wanted to, you actually asked my question already, Amy, which is great. So then I can just make a comment, but I did wonder about the family stuff because this kind of thing touches a nerve with me, thinking of wanting to write or do some sort of, piece of art that addresses this with my own family. I mean, my family were already in Canada right after World War II, so they weren't immediate family weren't. My father's family weren't living under communist rule like the Soviet Union, like that, like your mother. But I still have been fascinated the last several years with epigenetics. Because I grew up with my father who was always watching Holocaust documentaries. To me as a child, he seemed obsessed with them. But I got drawn in real fast. So since like I was 9 or 10, I would watch them with him and I would feel, I think his feelings of guilt in the intergenerational past. And I just see that in so many people's lives, whether it's in Europe or whether here on this continent with Black and Brown people and Indigenous people. And I just wanted to thank you for doing this. Because it's hard to talk about, but we're all carrying this stuff around and I want better for the new generations. And I like the hope that you put on here about how, or your experts put on it about how we can choose to do better and live a certain way because we have this stuff. And if we're able to sense that it's happened and not shy away from it, but like so many places in like the US these days, they don't want kids to talk about this stuff because it'll make them feel guilty. And I don't know if that's the helpful way to look at it. So I'm glad we're talking about it and thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that response. It means a lot that it brought up some of your own stuff. And also I'm glad that it felt hopeful at the end. I really wanted it to feel hopeful at the end and not just really sad.
Yeah, well, like Amy said in our mother's story stuff that some of us are writing, it's whether it's my father or it's this thing I'm doing, writing about my own mother, there's this stuff in their past and it does trickle down, but that there is hope. So thanks.
Thanks, Carrie. And I think too, we wait too long because I did that with my own grandparents, right? I waited too long to ask them questions about like really deep questions about their lives growing up. And now they're all past and that information is gone from their perspective. So don't wait that long. Yeah. Okay, Veronique, we're going to ask Marianne. Marianne's got a hand up, so Marianne maybe has a question or a comment.
I have some of both, because you know me when it comes to art. This piece absolutely fascinated me when I read that this was coming. I'm super stoked about it. Veronique, thank you for a very vulnerable and inspired share, first off. I don't know that anyone could have done something this way, certainly not any better. And I appreciate the journey as you discovered your family's stuff, but also a way through your own mind, your own quote unquote madness, as you put it. I really appreciated the journey, and I'm also wondering, is this piece out there for the public? In the US, May is Mental Health Awareness Month and so on. And I would love to, if it is out there for the public, I certainly would love to find ways to share this piece, if you want it shared, in public spaces that are not just blindness public spaces, because what you've done is something that I hope in some ways you want to share in wider spaces in the world, because the work is amazing. The journey is wonderful to go on. And I love the fact that it's fragmented, because that gives those of us whose brains are not neurodivergent more of an understanding, and that it's not even that all the thoughts are complete, because sometimes the thoughts aren't complete. And I really appreciated that level of vulnerability in this work.
Thank you, Marianne. Veronique, would you like to respond?
Sure. Yeah, I really appreciate your feedback. And yeah, I think we're talking with Rumpelzeter, who were one of the producers for the project. We are planning on having the video up on their website at some point, probably in July, I think we were talking about. So yeah, I could definitely send the link to you, Amy, if you want to share it with other folks. If they want to share it as well, because yeah, I appreciate your offer to share it widely, Marianne. Yeah, and also thanks for those thoughts on the fragmentedness. Yeah, I think as like a writer, definitely something that I had to unlearn was like not to censor that part of myself, because I think when I first started writing, I was like, oh, I have to write plays in, a very linear, cohesive way, because that was sort of the plays we read and the plays we were taught. But I was lucky enough to encounter a few playwrights who were really like kind of fucking with those rules, and they really inspired me to break some of those rules myself and, just write the way that my mind worked. So yeah, thank you.
Embrace that. And this will also be available on our YouTube channel too, for folks who weren't able to see it tonight or want access to this conversation as a companion to the work, because I think those things are all lovely. Thanks, Veronique. Sean and Christy have a hand, and then Tilo has a hand.
Now I'm muted.
Guessing it's Christy though.
Yeah, it's usually me.
It's usually Christy. On the off chance it will be Sean, but usually it's Christy.
Well, I'm the writer, so I have to say I'm always intrigued by listening to other writers, and I know I've gotten the comment that my writing is quote unquote too raw sometimes, and I'm like, well, that's the way I write. So I applaud you for writing the way you write. And I mean, I think there's something to be said about that, right? Because I mean, we can all filter and we can all have disclaimers, but at the end of it, it's your story, and somewhere out there, someone else needs to hear it, right? The other thing I wanted to say is that the whole "how are you" from your mom. Oh my gosh, my mom and I go through that every single day, 3 times a day at least. And I know all she wants to hear is "I'm fine" when she goes, "How are you?" Because sometimes I fuck with her and I go, "Yeah, mom, I'm not good," and she goes, "Oh, that's good. What? Yeah. And I'm like, "Yeah, you just expected me to say I'm fine." So that really resonated with me. And I mean, yeah, my mom will never talk about her stuff. And I'm making that decision to talk about my stuff, because I can't carry that baggage, right? Now we have too many options to kind of deal with it, or at least make it a little less heavy. So this is a beautiful piece. I feel like I saw a version of it. I can't remember if I saw it through Revolver years ago, or Push, something with. I was doing some accessibility work, and I might have seen one version of this when you were now working on the embedded DV. And I might have seen like the pre-version. I really love what you did with the embedded DV. It really works. So, in short, great work.
Thanks, Christy.
Undownloaded. Null. Raised hand. 3-bar signal strength. Spotlighted user.
There goes those screen readers. Veronique, would you like to respond before I bring Tilo in?
Sure. I'll just quickly say, thanks for sharing about your own journey with your mom, and just like, yeah, those questions people ask that are so hard to answer.
Audio now unmuted. Minimize meeting. Speak.
Hang on, friends. We'll just mute some of those screen readers. Go ahead, Veronique.
Oh yeah. All good. Yeah, no, just thanks for sharing, Christy, about your own experiences, and yeah, I'm glad that the piece resonated for you.
Okay, we've got Tilo, and then we've got Louise. Go ahead, Tilo.
Hello. I noticed this show was just one person, and I praise you for going on just as one person, because I tried one time doing this. And only
Audio now unmuted. Mute mic.
10 minutes, and I didn't have anything in the background or anything like that, but I think the background stuff you put was quite good, quite interesting. Once I was walking around because I had to turn over my rice when I was cooking rice and that. And I thought I heard something in the background, and I was wondering what it was, and I thought it was going outside, and it was actually on the video you had. Once I was close to my speaker, then I realized it was from the video. So that was really good. And another part I was thinking of, talking to my mom, we did a lot. I knew what she was like when she was growing up and that. But what I did lose was the relationship with my grandmother when my father and my mother had separated, and that I did get to know my father a little, but I didn't get to know my grandmother. And then when I realized she was already in a nursing home, and still I didn't go and try and make an effort, and I wish I had, because there's so much history that I would have liked to know from her and not from the history books. And I lost that, and I wish I would have could have done that. So if you could talk to your mom or people around you who are older and get some perspective that was like when they were young, that's great. And there was a third thing, but I forgot what it was. So that's all I have to say for now. And thank you for bringing this on also. Yes.
Okay, let's go to Louise and then Nancy.
Hello. Okay,
Hi,
first of all, Veronique, I love your name. I love your name. It's just beautiful. Okay, I was going to comment in a different way, because you made me really start thinking of my family. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. You started me making sense of my own family in a different way. Though there's no other countries and not that kind of stuff. I started looking at me being my mother in some ways, and some of the things, and going back and realizing I don't have enough history about my mom's side of the family, or my dad's. I have enough, but I have some. But what really came to me was something totally different tonight, and it's going to sound weird. I started looking at who my mother was and what I became and who I became because of who she was. We both have some of the same things. Hers are more old-fashioned than mine, but my parents wanted to have children, no matter if they were going to be disabled or not, you know, and I wanted to have children, knowing that there was a chance they could be visually impaired or have disabilities. And I started realizing the history we do carry down from our family what we're brought up in. And it was something, I don't even know how and why it came to me tonight, but it was like you sharing the generational stuff, I guess, made me look at my family in a different way. And I thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Louise. That makes me, I definitely think that is another thematic level to it for sure. And like that makes me think about how, I think when I started writing the piece, initially it was very weighted towards the idea that my mom just didn't want to talk about any of this stuff. But as I was writing it, I was like, actually, there's a lot of things I don't want to talk to my mom about as well. And so, as you say, like I was repeating a lot of those patterns of like, just, leaving certain things out and omitting things as well. So, I think there are a lot of ways we tend to mirror our past generations for sure.
And it can be in discipline, it can be in how we raise our kids, it can be how we handle situations in our lives, it can be the fact we want to, and we want to make changes and make it better for our kids, but somehow we don't always do that. When I come up back and sit there and say, the determination of who she was, it made me a different person, because if I had a different kind of mother, I would be a totally different kind of person. So our parents, especially our mothers, form us. And you made me realize that tonight in a different way. And, I guess because I've been going through a big process with my parents right now, with my mother and dad. And it's just maybe in a different way, could we just, helping us get able to move and that, the support. But, sometimes it's not just the support from my parents, it's things they hide from us too. They do hide things from us, and we have to accept that they're human like we are, because we don't tell our kids everything. I guarantee I don't tell my kids every last little secret. So I now realize I can go back and look at who she is and see that generational differences. And thanks to you sharing tonight, I can't even put it. It just made me realize some of the things I'm now seeing the patterns to.
That's lovely, Louise. Hey, Louise,
yeah.
Do you ever share with your 3 boys, any bits about your life growing up?
Yeah, they know some of it. They know some, not everything, but if they wanted to know more, yeah. Having sons is different, I think, than having daughters.
Maybe.
My daughter-in-law is always asking me questions more than my sons.
Yeah. Maybe we don't wait for them to ask questions. Maybe we just volunteer information.
Yeah, you know what? And I've been doing a little bit of that as time. But you know what? You made me realize that I maybe have to make sure my sons really know and understand me, so they understand themselves.
So they don't wait until they're 50 to start asking you questions.
Yeah, and I can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Louise.
But thank you, Veronique and Amy, for the wonderful thinking process today.
All right, Nancy, and then Megan. Just give Nancy a moment to unmute. And I think Megan will be our last question or comment for the evening.
Audio selected. Lower button.
I'd like to say thank you. I'm writing a story about my mom too, and I'm now finding more, even though my mom told me a bit about herself, but I think she told me, not in front of anyone else, but I felt like writing this story, I felt like my sister didn't know about the story, and I feel like, well, I'm going to write it anyways, even though she told me about the story, and I feel good that I listened to what you had to say too today. Say what you have to say, what was in her way of saying things. Even though my mom came from India and she passed away now I got to fill in the blank that I can write things down. And it makes me feel good that I got to listen to what you had to say today. And I like how you said you're on the bus and people are staring at you. And that's what I always felt like. Everyone was staring at me. So it's good. And I like the music. And back then they didn't have phones, and the phone rang. And, it brought me memories when I got to say goodbye to my mom. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. It really means a lot to hear your response.
Yeah.
And now lowered.
All right, and Megan. We'll give Megan a moment to unmute.
Yes. Hold on there.
It's gonna take you for supper Saturday.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, at 4:00.
Okay. Anyway, I was gonna say, like, sorry I missed the piece because I had to do the BC People Birthday and Stuff Advocacy Board. So
that's okay. It'll be available on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Megan.
And what was it about? What was it about? About Mother's Day?
No, it was about Veronique's journey and learning some things from their mother. So, but if you want to check it out on our YouTube channel, it'll be there for you to catch up on.
I will.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's worth it.
I love my mom actually, because I love my mom, and she helped me with a lot of things. She was actually an amazing mom. I could say that. she was really good. You know, there were some hard times, but hey, we went through it, and here I am today.
Megan, do you ever ask your mom about what her life was like growing up?
Well, actually, I saw her house in Moose Jaw when I was there in Moose Jaw, and yeah, and and I could ask her. Maybe I could do a video and send it. Well, not maybe too personal, right?
Well, just to have a conversation with your mom so that you could learn a little bit about what her life was before you were born.
Yeah. I think it's a good idea. Yeah. I really, yeah. Awesome idea. I love that.
Thanks, Megan.
Welcome.
We often forget that our parents had lives before we came along. Full, possibly rich, possibly devastating lives before we even came along. So, and I don't think we ever really asked them what that was like before they had kids. Darn it, kids are selfish. Veronique, I wonder what's next for this particular project. Is there another version that you are thinking about doing, or traveling with it somewhere? What are your hopes for it?
I mean, honestly, it's sort of done. Like, I was developing it for quite a long time, like I think maybe 5 or 6 years, and so I was sort of done with it at this point. Like, I mean, if somebody wanted to present it somewhere or something, like maybe I would consider doing it again, but I haven't really tried to push for that too much because I feel like it had the life that it needed to have, and like we got some good responses, and yeah, I feel like there are other things. Like, I don't know, when you've kind of made peace with something and you're like ready to explore other things, that's sort of where I feel like with it right now.
Are you willing to share? Can you share something that you are considering exploring next as a creative?
Yeah, I guess there's a sort of like a kind of multimedia, like it's probably going to be an installation of some kind type thing that is like in the very early stages of kind of like ideation, I guess, which involves interviews with young people who are neurodivergent or have mental health disabilities about basically, like, I'm interested in like monsters, like the sort of concept of monsters in terms of like fantasy series and like tabletop RPGs and that kind of stuff, and how neurodivergent people and people with mental health disabilities like see themselves reflected in that because I think a lot of us do when we're growing up. So yeah, that's sort of like the thematic thing it'll be exploring. Yeah.
Ooh, I look forward to witnessing that. That sounds excellent. I would say anything that I have been a part of that you've done was great. Do you want to maybe, if you are open to sharing, just a few sentences or a little bit about the and I don't remember the name of the project, Veronique, but the little walking tour that we went on with the audio recordings?
Oh yeah. So that was actually kind of like a how do I explain it? It was sort of like another, like a associated project with this project with Szepty Whispers, where basically I asked some other artists that I knew to do short little like audio recordings talking about their own relationships to mental health and language and lineage. And then we took all of these audio recordings and we put them into a website and with like transcripts and ASL videos. And we also made it kind of interactive. So the idea is that you would sort of like encounter fragments of the recordings, and then you could choose which recordings you wanted to like read or see or watch the whole thing. from, and which ones you would only get to hear that fragment or watch the fragment, or so it was kind of like you would never get the full thing. You'd have to go through it again, and then you might catch like parts of it. Again, very fragmented as all of the things are. But yeah, it was really cool because it was like just great to, again, like sort of like what's happening here. I think get all these different perspectives on some of the questions that the piece is asking. I think that's really why, what is important to me about the project is like, how can, it generate conversations between people about some of these themes. Yeah, and the other thing that was cool is that audience members could leave responses themselves after they visited the website. And so there were some audience members who left some like audio recordings and also like written responses. So that was really cool.
Awesome. Veronique, I'm so appreciative of your time in this space. I'm so appreciative of our friendship, and I'm looking forward to more work that you do, because I really value it, and I really think it has a strong place in the Canadian arts landscape. So thank you for sharing it. But before I say goodbye officially, we have a prize draw.
Right.
Right. The prize draw. So I'd like to bring Sarah into the space, and as a reminder to folks, Sarah's got everybody's name, and Veronique is going to provide a magical cue word, and it can be anything you want. But I'm going to put you in Sarah's hands to orchestrate this draw.
All right. So any word, whenever you want.
Sunset.
Sunset. Ooh, I love it. I have Christy Braley.
Christy Braley is the winner of the prize draw this evening. So Christy, we will connect with you via email to get you your prize. And congratulations again. Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you once again, Veronique, for joining us on the Almost Live platform. Really appreciate your time.
Audio now unmuted.
Thank you.
Space. Speech on demand.
Thank you, Amy, so much for having me. And yeah, same goes to you. Really appreciate your work in the community and your friendship. And yeah, also thanks everybody for attending and asking such great questions and offering such thoughtful responses.
We got a good group here.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.